All right, we're live.
Right. Yeah, no, I think we're just going to jump into this because I haven't actually made any preparation for this. Yeah. Sorry, someone commented. Was that you?
Oh no,
Okay.
I didn't mean to click that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So should we just jump into it?
Yeah, let's jump in.
I don't think we need introductions. I mean, it's the same. I mean, well, no, it's not.
Actually, Kraz and Sammy are new to the podcast.
Yeah. No. So. Yeah. Yeah. No. Yeah. Oh yeah. By the way, happy birthday, Genya. Forgot to say.
Yep. Happy birthday.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's your birthday. We should sing for you.
She hear us?
I could sing for you if you want.
I'm not gonna sing. You don't want to hear me sing.
Okay, so what was the first section again? Was that
so the first one? Yeah.
Places, yeah.
The first section is California 25. The
oh yeah,
of
course, yeah. Yeah. Okay, so
I'm hearing you.
Yeah, there we go. We can hear you now.
I can't hear Nick at all.
Sorry? Can you not? Okay, that's awkward. Yeah, no. So yeah, I'll just run through.
Oh, you can't hear any of us.
Okay, yeah.
I can hear you. Eric.
Okay.
All right.
Hang on, I'm muted. No, I'm.
Yeah, all I get from Nick is silence.
That's so weird. Okay, I'm. Wait, can you hear me now?
No, I've been able to hear you this whole time.
No, and my mic is on. So, is Nick muted?
Okay, I'm not muted now. No, I think I'm fine. I'm not sure if the other two can hear me. There you go.
Still can't hear him.
Or the other three. Okay. This is awkward.
Mm-hmm.
Can anyone else hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I can
hear you just fine.
Yeah, totally.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so I can't hear him. So
well, I'm not
what's
sure
going
what
on
you're
in my
doing.
end?
I think
can you see any windows at the bottom? Like, what do your screens look like? Can you see any windows at the bottom with the other people?
I see you, Kraz, Nick, and then the black screen for Sammy.
Is there a microphone icon?
Microphone is on.
For the other people, like, can you see the other people microphone icons?
Yeah, everybody but Sammy.
Okay, so click on click on Nick's microphone icon. See if that would do it.
Okay. All right. I clicked on him and nothing.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Okay, so how do we work around this?
I think we should just jump straight in. I mean, I know you can't hear me right now. I think
yeah, he's saying just to.
I think we're just gonna have to
go ahead, and we'll have to work around it. But just go ahead because I mean, this is your floor for California, so.
Yeah.
All right, so exactly. California 25. This was not a boring congressional race, and certainly was not a boring special election. Definitely, many places changed their ratings multiple times. Even I tilted my rating a little bit from a tiltar to a leanar. I'm glad I did. I'm sure the people on Predict It were glad I did. Apparently, I made some people some good money.
Yeah.
I didn't even know what Predict It was until like 3 days ago. I mean, seriously, I had no idea. So it was interesting to see Mike Garcia pull ahead and win by the surprisingly generous margin that he won by. I mean, he had a 12-point lead, and that lead did not close. As a matter of fact, the lead kept widening the further in we got into the vote counting. Even I didn't think he was going to win by that much. Yeah,
I was shocked by that. I mean, I had thought if he was going to win, and I thought he was going to win by like 1 or 2 percentage points after 3 or 4 weeks of recounts and ballots.
As did
and no, he went by 12%, and I'm like, okay, that's something.
One of the things that really surprised me was he did incredibly well. Ventura County, he and Christy Smith had a much closer race. LA County is where he broke ahead apart from the pack. Mm-hmm. He actually had a sizable lead in LA County, and I was not expecting that. I was expecting his lead to be Ventura County and then having to catch up in LA. Not he had the lead county and then Ventura was where there was less of a difference between him and Christy Smith.
Mm-hmm. I mean, everything went right for him. The Trump endorsement didn't seem to hurt. The Christy Smith stuff really seemed to hurt. I mean, I don't know if he wins by 12 points if she doesn't have that issue with him.
Yeah, her gaffe was stupid.
Do we have all the precincts in? Oh no, because I'm checking the results now. They still haven't.
She made the wrong mistake. I don't think
okay.
she meant it maliciously, but she did make the wrong mistake at the wrong time, and that probably did cost her the race. Because initially I was thinking, before I wrote my final piece, I'm thinking, she might have made up for the little bit of ground that she lost. And then after the video came out, I'm just like,
yeah,
really? I mean,
the
there are
ad
so
was
many
good
former
too.
military who live in Santa Clarita and Simi Valleys.
I mean, the takeaway I got from it, the takeaway I got from it, which may surprise some people, is that surprisingly in California, areas that have been conservative will vote for conservative sometimes. Traditional, Mike Garcia is not an aggressive. He had the Trump endorsement. He kind of went with him on a few issues, but he tended to avoid that. He just went on traditional California Republican stuff, tax cuts, and it worked. I mean, and he's a good candidate for that matter, but it just seemed to me like this idea that the Republican Party needs to radically reform all of its policies to conform around Trump. I think this shows it's good to have diversity within a party, because you can, in one area, you can run someone like Mike Garcia, who's a really good candidate for that seat, and he gets a couple lucky breaks and wins it. That just kind of shows me that you can't just kick out one leg of the stool. You got to have all of them in there, because you don't need to seed an area like California 25. It's not an area you need to lose.
No, it isn't. And I think the other thing that Garcia definitely was able to campaign on, and pretty strongly, is AB5, which is the bill just about every independent contractor, sole proprietor, freelancer in California is wishing at this point would get repealed or recalled, because it was such a truly terrible piece of legislation. There were a small group of people who benefited, but not nearly as many as they were sold. So I think Mike Garcia was also able to tap into the number of small business owners who are in California 25. And he was able to tap into that by pointing out Christy Smith voted in favor of AB5. And that's certainly not contributing to the economic recovery of California right now.
I mean, I don't know if Kraz has any, as a California, has any specific thoughts on that, but for me, I've seen so much backlash on Twitter from people just complaining 24/7 to the representative who proposed the thing, or the senator. I can't remember her name. It's hilarious, and it's really sad. I mean, you have all these people that are really hurting, and their outlet is just Twitter at this point.
Yeah.
Well, what I was going to say about that too, if I can chime in on this for a minute.
Can't hear Kraz.
Oh.
Really?
Okay.
Well, that's not good. Here, try backing out and coming back in. Maybe that'll fix the issue. Or can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Yeah.
I'm trying to ask Genya if she can.
I can hear.
Yeah. I can hear you. I just can't hear Kraz.
Yeah. Back out and come back in. That might be able to fix it. Hopefully.
I think he means refresh it and try to come back in.
Yeah, like close the window and then reopen it and come back in.
Or just reload it.
Yeah. Here, I'm going to go to the you have the link in the chat, right? Yeah. Oh, Robert's here. See if this will work.
Hello.
Did you hear him, Genya? Okay, I'm gonna just kick you, and then you can come back in, and then that way hopefully you can hear everything because there's some sort of muting issue. So let's see what this does. We'll see if this works. Sorry for the technical difficulties. We're still getting some stuff nailed out on the streaming end. So what were you going to say about the stuff, Kraz?
I was just going to say that even outside of California, I think the model Garcia was running on is something the GOP has tried to replicate. You can look at someone like I think is Wesley Hunt in Texas 7. Yeah, and so the model is essentially like you have these suburban districts that went for Hillary Clinton narrowly or were very narrowly for Trump, but they've swung away from the GOP. And the question is, how do you cope with that if you're a congressional candidate there? And yeah, you can be Brian Fitzpatrick, or you can be John Katko, or you can be Will Hurd. But the problem is, it takes so much effort. It takes all your time, all your resources, all your mental energy. You have to respond to every tweet. You have to watch what you say all the time. And especially in a condensed campaign cycle, like in a special election, your most valuable resource, is your time. It always is, but especially in a condensed cycle. And so I think the model is less, run away from Trump as fast as possible. And it's now, take his endorsement for what it's worth, right? Don't talk about him all the time, and just kind of focus on other things. So at least I don't know if that's going to work everywhere, but that's the model I've seen.
I would agree with.
Hey, I can hear everybody now.
Yay. So Kraz was just saying,
So I've driven through the district before. I lived in Los Angeles for about 4 years, and
Carry on, or was that it?
when I picture suburbs, is the person still going? When I picture suburbs in my mind, the district doesn't really come to my mind. Like, Genya, am I
you were
alone
talking
in
about
that?
people like Wesley Hunt in Texas 7. Are you talking about? Sorry, I didn't get all of that. Were you saying that the Republicans have those sorts of strong candidates, sort of like newcomers in these sorts of races? That's what I was sort of thinking. Because Garcia,
I was, but I think Sammy was saying something about suburbs, right?
Yeah.
Yes, he was.
Yeah.
Oh, was he? Oh, sorry. Yeah. Is it? No, I can't hear Sammy at all. I didn't know.
Everything's all kind of going
no.
super fast.
Okay, that's awkward. I'm sorry. It was just completely silent. Sorry. I'll shut up now.
There, Nick.
Oh, I guess just to say it again, just really quickly, just when I think of suburbs, I've driven through the district, and then when I think of suburbs, the district doesn't come to my mind. And I think Genya probably knows what I'm talking about because, she's talked about the uniqueness of the district before. Yeah, like the kind of things that people talk about the suburbs when, they're talking about the House and Trump and everything and how it's turning away from the GOP. The district doesn't really fit that criteria, at least what I've seen from my experience with it, which is limited. And I think, Genya, you were born there, right? Did you hear me?
Uh-oh.
I don't know what happened. Am I on mute?
No, I can hear you,
Am I
Sammy.
muted?
No, I got you.
I can't.
Genya, can you hear me?
Anything.
I can't hear. I mean, everything sounds really cut up. So I'm trying to figure out what anybody's been saying.
Huh.
I can hear you, Sammy. Though.
Oh, wait.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're having
Genya, can you
audio
hear me
issues
now?
today, and we're live.
Genya, can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Well,
you just sound like an alien from outer space.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, I
Okay.
get what you're saying. And I get what you're saying. And that area really, the suburban areas are really the Simi Valley, Santa Clarita areas, right? Those are the two more affluent areas, wealthier. I mean, just generally different areas, but you don't think Palmdale or Lancaster or the desert when you think of a suburb. Like, there are people that commute, which is just wild to me, that commute from those cities to Los Angeles and go back and forth every day, which is just wild to me. But that doesn't make it a suburb. That's kind of an exurb or commuter town.
Yeah.
I mean, right? Because, I mean, there aren't really, like, Lancaster and Palmdale aren't, I mean, they just aren't the traditional suburb. They're not that sort of place you would think of. But so, yeah, I agree on that front. Like, my base instructor, he was from the Bay Area, and then he moved to that area of the desert, not the desert, but Palmdale, Lancaster area. And he was there. He moved to North Carolina, and he went back to visit family, and he was surprised to find stoplights and traffic lights in the desert. And he was like, they're just wasting all their money in California. You know, those liberals are spending money putting stoplights in the desert. And then he drove by there during rush hour, and he saw people backed up going to and from. So he was like, oh, that's different than when I was there growing up. So I totally get that. It's a really interesting area. Just from what I've seen, what Genya's talked about, it's unique. I think that kind of helped. But the margin, I don't know if there's the margin that he won with. Normally, a special election, you win by this margin. You think the candidate has to be really favored in November, right?
Yes.
Like but it's California at the same time. It's going to be different playing field in November.
I would say it's toss up, but I would say Garcia should not be underestimated in the fall. I think the margin he won by was impressive. I mean, most people thought if he was going to win, it would be something very narrow, barn burner out of it. And I think did well. And I think, what will help him now is he's now going to be a Congressman Garcia, not, this, the challenger. And I think, in this tough times that we have with the coronavirus, if he's, able to say, look, I've been working my tail off, getting the district what it needs, give me, the chance to serve out again. I think that for a lot of people, it might be a message, that they may take very seriously and saying, we should give, him another term because he's working his butt off for us in D.C.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. He has a chance with the coronavirus. He has a chance to really make a difference.
It's worth noting that a lot of the forecasters, I was checking the Sabatos crystal ball, and they haven't changed the ratings change. They usually change on Thursdays, and if they were going to do that today, they would have done it. They haven't done
Interesting. They still have it as toss up or as lean down?
But they still have it as toss up. Yeah.
All right, that makes sense.
Yeah. Like, yeah.
I do think. Go ahead, Eric. Sorry.
Oh no, you can go. I wasn't going to say anything.
Oh, my apologies. I think one of the key interesting things with this race, and I think there's one race I think nationally that could, in the congressional wise, that could very well have some similarities, but just obviously with different things at place. I think could be Florida 26. A different type of Republican than you usually expect. I mean, Jimenez is sort of different from and I get it. South Florida has much more of a different GOP feel to it, but I think if Jimenez can play the same strategy book that Garcia ran in a Hillary Clinton type seat, I think that's a one that could very well be interesting. That I'm a fixer, not going to go to Congress to be anyone's poodle, and I want to be someone who will represent the area in the best way I can, and have a very different mindset. In Jimenez's case, he voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016. Obviously, that would have some ramifications, but he could say, look, I'm a moderate man, in Congress, and I'm going to, be moderate and work with everyone. And that's it. So that was just, one comparison I came to with the California result.
Yeah. I know we're going to go into the Florida House races later, but go ahead, Sammy.
Yeah, I just saw it.
I don't think that that's going to fly with that one because, the Democrats are attacking hard. I don't know exactly where it are, but since on record, since he's a mayor, right? You are talking about the mayor, right?
Yes,
of Miami-Dade County.
Yes.
Yeah, so he has a bigger record. He's not. I mean, I don't necessarily know Garcia's background that well, but he did not have the same kind of pedigree that this guy has, and pedigree meaning he's well known. And so the Democrats have been attacking him pretty solidly from, day one, ever since he announced, and also before. And not to get into local politics too much, but there'll be a competitive mayor's race in Miami-Dade County. So his record will be, he's not running, but just the same kinds of local issues and stuff. They'll be at the forefront of all the politics there. And, and Democrats will work very hard to tie him to Trump. As to whether or not that's going to hurt him in that district, that remains to be seen. It depends on how much ground Trump has gained in Florida, amongst Hispanics in that part of Florida. But I don't think it's a good pair. I don't think they're parallel because of how much of a,
Yeah, I think what I was trying to say, and I get it. Yeah, they're two different people with different, but sort of the campaign strategy of how to approach these things. There's a lot of Republicans in seats like that. In the last few years have had trouble playing a good line between Trump and moderate type of voters. So I just was using that example with Garcia, as something that can help Jimenez in South Florida, which is more open to going on a split ballot than most other parts of the country. If I was able to make that.
Well, it's a like I said, it's a resource allocation thing.
Yeah.
Valuable resource is your time. You can't get more of it. Everyone has the same amount of it. And so, what are you going to spend all your time worrying about this line you're walking, worrying about how you look in every single statement? Yeah, I'm sure there's a downside to, not distancing yourself from the president as much in these types of districts. But at the same time, like that downside is, might be less than the negative impacts of using up all your time to distance yourself from the president.
Yeah.
So, it's a resource allocation thing.
Yeah. And it's worth noting, at least in my opinion, that Mike Garcia didn't run as a moderate. He ran as a conservative that's not focusing. He's conservative on the social issues. He's conservative on the fiscal foreign policy issues, but he ran on the economy and foreign policy. And that worked really well in that seat. He didn't focus on the social stuff, even though he believes the social stuff. He didn't focus on Trump, even though he voted for Trump and is probably going to be supportive of most of his policy items. He focused on the economic stuff, foreign policy. And when he had to talk about immigration, he talked about, he wants a wall, but he also wants to make it easier for people to get in. Like, as far as Republicans go, that's relatively moderate, but that's not necessarily a fit everywhere. That's a good fit for that district.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Whereas in Florida,
Yeah, you can have a strong
Republicans. Yeah.
You can have a strong appeal to. Sorry, you can have a strong appeal to moderates and people across the aisle, like without actually being a moderate yourself.
Yeah, it's actually like the reverse Katie
Jason
Hill.
Candace said a couple of years ago. He wasn't. It is a bit.
Katie Hill or Katie.
I think it's.
Yeah. Katie Porter's a good example of this on the other side. She's she's very progressive. She ran as a progressive, but she also ran as someone who's pretty normal. She tried to do common ground, which a lot of liberals have tended to be more confrontational. They've tended to be kind of the Richard Ojeda, really, really confrontational guy.
Yeah.
Where she just ran as, I'm a progressive and this is what I'm doing to help you. And that's impressed in that part of California, amazingly. People want to think their representatives are working for them.
Yeah. It's interesting because that was the one deep endorsement Christy Smith had was Katie Porter's. I think that was the only relevant endorsement in 25 for the Democrats. The others were, I think, too little too late.
And I think what this race showed, I think, is, voters, even with trends, still value, that individual characteristic that this person that wants to represent me, I can, relate to them. And in many cases, Smith failed at times to relate with many voters in that seat, and Garcia did, and it's a seat, maybe trending that, but, her comments on the military, for one, obviously, I'm sure, she apologized to one, but it still did the damage with voters, who have military ties in their heads. Almost, why should we vote for someone who thinks it's funny to mock the military with constitutional law books? Whether it's fair or not, for voters, it's like, I don't relate to you.
And the funny thing is, interesting, Katie Hill was, I think, the more relatable candidate, even though, from what I remember about growing up in that area, there are a lot more Christy Smiths than there are Katie Hills or Mike Garcias. It's the land of Christy Smiths.
Yeah.
That is not
Christy Smith came off more like a Karen with
yes. It is the land of the Karens. And interestingly, they don't always vote for the Karens. I think for the most part in California 25, it's working class, and it's working class that made good. So they want people that they perceive are going to actually just buckle down, do their job, get the legislation through, and take care of their constituents. If they don't think that you're going to do that, they're not going to vote for you. It's one of the problems I think Steve Knight had. Yeah,
is that he was a Knight. That's why you would vote for him. There wasn't really anything other.
I think I was in good hands with him. I mean, end of story.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we're going to have to look, later this year to see how it goes in November to kind of get the full takeaway of what you can learn from this. But I think short term, I think Republicans can come away with this.
You haven't made any enemies.
Yeah. I think short term Republicans can at least say this, at least in some circumstances, we can win in some of these suburban areas or exurban, working class, whatever you want to call California 25. We can win in areas that Hillary Clinton won, that swung away from us, if we do certain things. And that may not work everywhere, but it could work in some areas, and it's better they work in some areas than in no areas.
Yeah.
If you just abandon that thing entirely and just commit all in to, we're just going to be the party of, this is the only thing we're going to do, I think that's a weak strategy. It's kind of what the Democrats did under Obama, right? Is he won, and so they hitched their entire wagon as, this is all we are. We're this party, and it works great when someone is popular until it doesn't.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden you're stuck with trying to rationalize how you're different when you're the whole time being you're similar. Mike Garcia didn't have that problem. He, like Brad said, he focused on what he was going to do, not on who he voted for, who he's going to vote for, how close he is to the president, how he's going to differ with the president. You can talk about those things, but it's not all you need to talk about.
And also, he pretty much stayed out of trouble the entire campaign, which most of his competitors, especially in the primary, could not seem to do.
He ran almost basically a perfect campaign, if there's ever one to say that.
For Republican California, yeah, you're right. That absolutely was a near flawless campaign. I haven't seen anything like that since maybe Buck McKeon. And that's a tough act to follow.
This is actually quite
that was when I realized
this is quite interesting to me to follow because I wasn't actually much of a big politics follower before Trump. Sorry, is someone talking right now?
I think Genya was going to say something else, but you can say after she finishes the first thought.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, sure.
Oh, so I'm speaking now. So one of the things that I'd noticed during the primary is the pivot when things changed from Steve Knight being the favorite in the Republican corner to Mike Garcia. It was when Mike Garcia got the endorsement from Buck McKeon. Because Steve Knight grew up, or his dad was Pete Knight, kind of the legendary pilot and infamous enemy of LGBT rights. And so Steve Knight grew up around Buck McKeon. And that Buck McKeon chose to give his endorsement not to Steve Knight, who he'd known most of his life, but instead to a newcomer, Mike Garcia. That was the indicator to me that the NRCC was taking a huge gamble. And it was a gamble.
Yeah, Mom, I'm doing something. Sorry. Sorry, it was a family thing. Sorry, I had to shut something out. Sorry.
Oh, no, that's all right. Go ahead, Genya.
Oh, God, now I have to remember what I said?
No, you were talking about him growing up around Steve Knight and endorsing Steve Knight or endorsing Garcia over Steve Knight.
Yeah, when the pivot happened was definitely when Buck McKeon decided to give his endorsement to Mike Garcia rather than Steve Knight, because Steve Knight was already the incumbent. He'd won the seat before in 2016. And that McKeon chose to give the endorsement to Mike Garcia, who's brand new. That was unusual. It was really an interesting thing to see. And that was when I was like, okay, Garcia's probably going to take this. And that was that was really where my view on the race changed.
And yeah, sorry for coming off too glowing of Garcia. We're not like, I don't know if most of us here would have voted for him, but he ran a good campaign. He really did. There's lessons you can take away from his sort of thing. But what interested me was how excited the California Republican Party seemed to be about this. Like they actually had some energy behind them for probably the first time in a decade that wasn't just, oh, we have, like most of their incumbents have been like the Steve Knights. Like they're either related to someone who was in power or they've just been there a long time. So you have the Ken Calverts who've been there forever. And you have the Mary Bono, Max, who she was Steve Bono's I mean, she was related if she was his wife, and so that just was kind of her thing. This is the first time you've had someone that's been like outside of that mold. That's like they're not related to the establishment. They're not related to this old California Republican figure. They're their new thing, and it's working. And people are actually excited about that because they're not having to go to a retread like we're going to go to the niece of some Republican candidate that had been there for years. Mm-hmm. This is actually something new they can look at and be like, yeah, this is interesting.
He was basically the Katie Hill of the Republican Party. If you think about it, because that's what she did for the Democrat when she ran in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
Again, they have a lot in common. Not the least of that they went to the same high school.
Really?
Oh, interesting.
High school.
Really? Huh. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Are they of similar age too?
No. Mike Garcia's Gen X and Katie Hill obviously is millennial.
Oh, okay.
But the thing that cracks me up is that again, California 25. It's a bit like Monopoly. Eventually, you wind up landing on all the properties. Everybody knows everybody, or is connected to somebody somewhere. So that's one of the other things that anybody who runs California 25, you almost have to be from there to survive the race. Because if you're not, you're going to get perceived as an outsider, and they will sniff you out like.
Yeah.
And plus, everybody gets recycled into some. I mean, the mayor and the, I think the former mayor was the former Assembly District 38 seat holder, and I think he was going to be running for the congressional seat and decided not to.
Yeah, well, as a Californian, I mean, people are angry about certain things like taxes and then the housing crisis and everything. And like, I don't know that much about it, but I can see that this AB 25 is unpopular. It's kind of funny. I'm a Californian, but I'm more focused on other states' politics than my own state. But that's because we're such a democratic state, and I'm a Democrat, trying to help other Democrats and organizations in other states like Florida or Pennsylvania. But, I guess for me, it's good to have a certain balance of power. And Garcia was, I mean, I think I haven't looked at his platform, but what you're saying is that he's a hard, staunch conservative. I mean, that's probably wouldn't be the person who I would vote for, but I didn't care for Christy Smith's military comment at all. And I didn't think her apology did anything to really, assuage the impact of that for me when I saw it. So, for me, it's good to have that balance of power. And, the California Republicans are pretty miserable. So I guess throw them a bone and, hope that they, learn, and then maybe we'll be able to take the seat back or maybe win another seat. I don't know, to make up for that loss. That's fine. But we'll see, I guess, how Garcia goes. But, good for them. They live in misery here. So good for them.
Yeah, I mean, I have a friend who's from Cameron. He's on the site, but he hasn't written anything. He's just kind of in the chat. But I feel so happy for him because he's had so many of these these false starts where it's like there's a glimmer of hope, and then it just goes away. It's like the "Don't give me hope" quote from Avengers Endgame. It's a gift. Like that's basically the story of the California Republican Party, and so that's just kind of why I'm excited for him. But it's definitely interesting. We're going to see if this. I mean, obviously, it goes into November, right? This might have an impact. We don't know if 85 is going to have any impact on any of the local races or the state legislative races. But it is interesting to look at because California is a big state. It had the most Republican votes outside of I think Texas and Florida. It had the third most. That's like 4 million votes compared to 8 million votes for Democrats. But that's still a lot of people there. There's still a base you can build off of. So we'll see if this goes anywhere. What'd you say, Genya?
The power of the donors and the Republican donors in California. They just haven't had anybody to throw money at lately.
Yeah.
Now they continue to throw their money at.
Yeah. I mean, they were going to want to they wanted to throw their money at Kevin Falconer to run for governor, but it was so hopeless that he didn't even run. The most one they had was Steve Poizner, who ran for insurance commissioner. I think. Oops.
I remember sitting on trial where they were asking what we knew about Steve Poizner, and that was just like, okay, so I'll never forget that name.
Yeah, but he lost by 6 points. He actually ran a really good race. He ran as an independent, which I wrote an article a while back about running as an independent in a state that's dominated by the other party to try and present an opposite view. And he ran well by running well in the Bay Area. He was really well known in that area. He had good margins there, but he still lost by 6. Like, that's the state of, you have a really good candidate who served before, running as an independent, has the endorsements from all the Bay Area newspapers, and he still loses. But that's the sort of thing California Republicans have gotten used to. I think we may have, unless we have anything else to say about California, it may be time to move on to the southeastern House districts. Unless we have anything else, I think we've kind of gone over all the notes from California.
I think
that's right.
Yeah. I mean, just wait for November. We'll see if this margin has anything to show if he loses to Christy Smith again in the rematch. Worth noting that I think someone else mentioned this last week, or I saw it on a Twitter comment. I would mention who it was if I remembered. That Christy Smith lost a close assembly race in 2016 to Dante Acosta. She had a gaffe in that race that was pretty embarrassing, similar to this one. And that one was kind of a racial gaffe. This one was, compared to this one, which was a military gaffe. But she came back in 2018 and she beat him by a couple percentage points.
That's because Dante Acosta got accused of sexual harassment.
Oh, yikes.
Yeah.
So we'll see. Hopefully Mike Garcia doesn't have that issue, for everyone's sake.
She's got a wonderful political. I mean, seriously, she's an asset. So I hope he does everything he can to keep her happy, especially in DC.
So the next segment, I think Nick's having some audio difficulties, but the next segment we're going to do is on the southeastern House races.
Wait a second. Can anyone hear me?
I can hear you.
I can. Yeah.
I can hear you.
Okay.
Yep, go ahead.
Yep. Nice. Okay. Good stuff. Okay. So we're covering southern House races now. So yeah, I mean, I was interested in doing this section because last week there was the whole thing about Denver Reagan in his seat. I know Eric's got a couple of things to say on North Carolina.
Yeah, I can go over North Carolina.
And South
Carolina really quickly.
Yeah, we covered Florida, and I'm not sure if anyone wants to cover Texas because that's technically part of the South, but I'm not sure it is. We'll see where it goes. Yeah,
there's also Georgia.
So Georgia, of course. Yeah. So I think I'll just give it to Eric now because I know you've prepared a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and test out the share screen here. I'll pull up a map of the new North Carolina congressional districts. It's kind of getting confusing at this point. We've been through, this is the third one we've had this decade, thanks to gerrymandering and court rulings. So this is see if this works. Yeah, this is the new map. I have issues with this map that aren't related to partisan stuff, but this is a map that we have to live with now. And so there have been some changes in the competitiveness. Democrats actually are favored to pick up, or they're going to, it's not a matter of favor, they're going to pick up several seats. So we're going to go over, first I'm going to go over the one seat where their competitiveness was reduced. North Carolina won. So that's the seat, this rural seat. It goes from Vance County up in the northeastern area to Wayne, some of the areas in the Inner Banks, which is outside the Outer Banks. So that seat is represented by G.K. Butterfield. He's been there forever. A member of the Congressional Black Caucus. I believe he chaired it for a while. It used to stretch from Durham County, which is very liberal, the most Democratic county in the state. It voted for, I believe it gave Clinton at least 75 to 80% of the vote. So that's chopped out. So all of a sudden, this seat went from one that voted for Hillary Clinton by 38 points to one that voted for her by 11 points. It's closer to Georgia's 2nd congressional now than it is to what it used to be. In theory, this is a seat Republicans could maybe compete in 20 years from now. They can't right now. The most credible candidate they had, Michelle Nix, she lost her race. And so this is a very safe seat for right now, but it is one to keep an eye on in the future. It's also only marginally a majority-minority seat. This new version is actually only 41% black. It's only protected in the sense that G.K. Butterfield is an incumbent, and you can't draw out a black incumbent by chopping up the black community. So that's how he's protected. That's the one seat Democrats have bad news in. The rest of them are all good news. So the 2nd congressional district over here is in Wake County, suburban Wake County, part of Raleigh, Cary, Apex. White areas, very liberal. It went from a seat that was Trump won by 10 to one Clinton won by 24. The notable thing in this seat is that Deborah Ross was the Senate candidate in 2016 for the Democratic Party. She ultimately lost to Richard Burr by 6 points. So it wasn't particularly competitive race towards the end, but she's the nominee in that seat and she will pick it up. That's one Democratic gain. Another one we have is North Carolina 6. So this is Guilford County and Forsyth. That's Greensboro, High Point, and most of Winston-Salem. This is the district that you see Mark Walker's. Mark Walker is retiring. It wouldn't matter anyway because it wasn't a seat Trump won by 15 to one Clinton won by 21. This is another safe flip. Kathy Manning, who lost, I believe, to Ted Budd last time in the 13th. Yeah, she's the nominee in this seat and will pick it up, no question. Another one, North Carolina's 8th district. So those are the ones that are going to flip. There's 2 Democratic flips, 2 and 6. Both of them going to has-been candidates, not necessarily star recruits for the Democratic Party, but people who ran well enough in races they did last time.
Yeah.
So the one seat Republicans have to keep an eye on is the 8th congressional district. This is still a very Republican seat. This stretches from Cabarrus County, which is Concord, North Carolina, Kannapolis, suburban seat, but still working class rural areas, stretches all the way snakes to Cumberland County, which is a majority minority county that has Fayetteville, which is a military town. So basically half of it is a military town and the other half is a minority urban area. This seat went from one that Trump won by 15 to one that Trump won by 9. So this did become substantially more competitive on paper. It also lost all of Rowan County. Rowan County is right above Cabarrus. It's very conservative county. It lost that portion. So the incumbent is Richard Hudson, who is a just pretty average backbencher Republican. I think he may be on some big committees, but he's not necessarily a star candidate for them. But the problem is the Democrats don't have a credible candidate here. The challenger is Patricia Timmons Goodson. I believe she was a court judge, but she's not really a great recruit. So it shouldn't be competitive now, but it could be competitive in a Democratic midterm. So if Trump won in 2020, it could be very competitive in 2022 because Cabarrus County is turning left a little bit. It's not remotely competitive yet, but it's close enough. And if you have big enough turnout in Cumberland County, it could have some competitiveness in the future. Another one, North Carolina 9. I know people are going to ask about that one. Dan Bishop is the incumbent there. He won a narrow election over Dan McCready, who had lost an election probably because of voter fraud, maybe because of voter fraud. We don't know. We'll never know, but might as well assume he lost it because of voter fraud. Because the previous Republican, Mark Harris.
Mark Harris, yeah.
Didn't get a seat, and he's probably going to go to jail if he's not already there. So you would think this seat would be competitive. It's really not. It went from Trump plus 11 to Trump plus 11. So really nothing has changed here. And given that it's not a midterm, Dan Bishop should have no issue winning the seat. Robeson County is turning redder. Scotland at the Hoke are turning redder. Basically all of the rurals here in Union County are holding. It's just the Mecklenburg portion that's a little bit bluer. So really not one to look at. And then North Carolina 11. I know a lot of people focus on this one because it's a blue dog seat. This is where Keith Schuler used to be the representative in. If he was drawn out, his seat was literally split in 2, and he didn't run because he was going to lose either of the ones he ran in. So the previous representative, Mark Meadows, pulled a sneaky one. He really did. So he resigned after the cutoff came in for candidates to withdraw from state legislative races. So when he resigned to become the Trump, I believe, chief of staff, he did so at a time when Democrats could not actually nominate a credible replacement candidate. If he had waited or if he had done it earlier, they could have actually found someone credible. Joe Sam Queen is an incumbent representative for Swain County and Jackson County. He would have been a credible recruit, but because of the deadline, he couldn't file. And Democrats, currently their candidate is not good. It's going to be this guy, I believe he was a military veteran. He spent most of his time complaining that Trump has blocked him on Twitter. It's not viable. The one thing to look here is the Republican primary. It went to a runoff. So there are two candidates Republicans can choose from. There's the first one is Linda Bennett, who's a businesswoman. She has an endorsement from, I believe, from Mark Meadows. So she's a decent candidate. The other one that's kind of excited some Republicans is a 24-year-old real estate and motivational speaker, Madison Cawthorn. He's really mobilized some young conservatives in the area because he's young, but also he's paralyzed from the waist down. He was going to join the Army, but he got into a car crash before he could join and was paralyzed from the waist down. So that's his story, and it's really, really met with some people. He's kind of a motivational figure for some. So both of them would be good candidates for the Republican Party, especially given who the Democratic candidate is. So that's kind of the quick rundown on North Carolina. Expect 2 and 6 to flip. 8 could maybe be within 5 to 6 points. The rest of them you shouldn't really worry about. And then since we're talking about the Carolinas, I'll just mention what I think of South Carolina's first congressional district. Is the only competitive one in that state. That's the one that's been drawn from. It's been drawn from Charleston along the coast. It just kind of snakes off along islands. It doesn't really make a lot of sense as a district. The incumbent is Joe Cunningham, no relation. He's a Democrat. The likely Republican is going to be Nancy Mace, who is a pretty good candidate, but she's not had good fundraising numbers. This is a seat Trump won by about 10 percentage points. But it could be closer this time, and Joe Cunningham was a good candidate. He had opposition to offshore drilling, was a big position that he took that got him votes in that district. So that's one to pay attention to as well, if they can hold that seat. That could also influence redistricting because they will have to redraw. And Republicans, if he wins again, convincingly, they may just decide to leave him there. Just give him the Charleston County seat, kind of draw in some of the more minority areas nearby, and just kind of let him have it. But that's kind of how that lays out. Best case scenario is Republicans flip the first, which would be a net loss of 1 in the Carolinas. Either way it goes, Republicans are losing seats from those two states.
For me, the 9th one is interesting because, I really feel that 2019 was not a great, in terms of the special elections and everything throughout the earlier part of the year, going into, I think McCready's race probably marked the end of this part of 2019 because we flipped the Kentucky seat and we kept Louisiana, we flipped Virginia, but I really think that the squad combined with the Democratic debates being so everybody was moving far left, they were so dramatic and kind of a headache to watch. I think it really, and then of course the press covered all of that from the squad to all the stuff about that was happening in the debates right then that, the national I think the national environment just kind of just casts a shadow on McCready because I thought he was a great candidate for that district. And I thought that, he had the energy, and there was voter fraud in that race in the 2018, but I don't think that I think the district itself is Republican enough that probably wasn't the thing that tipped the balance in that race. But with this time, you would think, especially because he started his campaign in 2017 for the 2018 race, and then he had basically been running for 2 years, that, I think that he should have done better, a little better than he did. He lost by 1.9. But I really do think that it was and Trump coming to Fayetteville was, just a kind of a further nationalizing of the race, and just a reminder, I guess, that, that the people in that district would not be comfortable with a Democrat representing them because they've had a Republican representing them since 1963. So, but I think under the right, it depends on, I guess, on how Biden and how strong either Biden or Trump is. I could see the 9th possibly flipping, even though it's a long shot. And Bishop, he made some controversial stuff during the impeachment stuff. I could see Democrats hitting him on that. So, but, so I think that one's not completely lost, but, Yeah,
it's a tricky situation, right? Because it's really, I'm going to let someone else go off on this. I always have to say that he's a great candidate for half of that district. The problem is the district doesn't make geographical sense. So the Mecklenburg Union portion, the Mecklenburg and then the Union portion that directly is adjacent to Charlotte, that's suburbia. The rest of the district is rural, it's working class, and it's trending Republican. So basically when Republicans drew the seat, they were thinking, we can afford to lose some votes in the Mecklenburg area. We can afford to even lose some in the Union area because we're going to gain votes in the eastern portion of the seat. And this is the sort of stuff that made that Republican gerrymander brilliant. Aside from that race, and aside from the 13th, I believe every Republican finished with 55% of the vote. They split votes evenly. They split across geographical areas to make it difficult for a candidate to win across them. So in 2018, McCready ran more of a campaign focused on the East, right? He did very well in Robeson, Scotland, Hoke, Anson, all those areas. He focused almost more entirely on Mecklenburg in 2019 because he's like, okay, I just got to gain some votes there. But when he did that, he lost the votes in the East because Dan Bishop could come in and say to the Lumbee, hey, I'm going to vote to recognize you. I'm going to be your strongest advocate in Congress. And they listened to him. And then you have the Fayetteville portion, which is rural. It's not part of core Fayetteville. It's outside. So I think he just fell victim to, it's just a hard seat to run in because it's going to vote along partisan baseline unless you have a candidate that can appeal to both the suburbs, both to the Karen crowd, and to this right working class or minority working class Lumbee areas that have very different interests and beliefs and desires than the suburban area. It's the same issue with the Richard Hudson area. What'd you say?
Do you think McCready has a future? I saw talk about him running for Burr's Senate if he resigns, but I'm not sure if that's realistic.
He would have if he had won the race. He's a two-time loser at this point.
Yeah.
The problem is,
after he lost, I thought he was gone, but I don't know. I could see National Democrats getting behind him if he ran for Senate.
Yeah. Well, let's say that the seat is redrawn and it for some reason includes a lot more of Mecklenburg County and a lot more of Cabarrus County. He might run and he might be more competitive there. But the problem is he's a two-time loser now. He really only had kind of unique appeal as like a John Ossoff type candidate where he's really disciplined, he's really focused, kind of robotic. Except North Carolina doesn't really fall for what I kind of jokingly say that, this is the type of candidate who's going to say, I own a gun, I served in the military, I went to church, please vote for me. That works well in some areas.
Jason Kander crowd.
Yeah, that works well in rural Missouri, rural areas, but it doesn't really work in North Carolina as well. Yeah. McCready tried to do that, and he did really well. He did admirably. He did more than great for that district. He probably would have won it if it had been under the old lines, which included more of Mecklenburg County, went up to Iredell. But he was just doomed in this race. And really, Democrats have other candidates they can go for. They can go for, Josh Stein, who's the Attorney General, or not, the Attorney General of the state. They could go for Roy Cooper after he serves out his term. There are other candidates they could go with. So, I don't know.
Yeah, but
he kind of got a bad draw.
I assume if Burr does resign, which is still unknown at this point, Democrats would be like completely rushing to find the candidate, and they might not be able to come up with like a top quality recruit because in the normal race, I mean, if you can remember, that was a bit of a recruitment panic. I mean they ended up getting a candidate who they think is good. I'm still not too convinced with that, but it could.
I don't think Burr. Yeah, I think Burr is uniquely in a position where he not only does he not want to resign, he doesn't have to. He's not going to. He said already he wasn't going to serve another term past 2022.
Yeah,
he can just wait until September 5th. And the difference between September 4th and September 5th is if he resigns on September 4th, the Republicans give three candidates to Roy Cooper. One of them becomes the senator, and then both parties choose candidates for the Senate race, which just coincides with the regular election. September 5th is to the point where it actually moves back to 2022. So if he does resign, it would be past that point. So there's not another Senate race, which I'm not going to defend what Richard Burr did if he did it. I'm just going to say I don't want another Senate race. We already have a Senate race. Yeah. We have 10 statewide races. We have judicial races. We have a presidential race. I don't need any more races in my state. We're good. We're fine with what we have right now. My television can't handle having 2 senators running. I mean, just no. Please no.
Yeah. I feel that.
Yeah, I think the incentive to hold out till September 5th is just too great for him, right?
Mm-hmm.
I also think that, Democrats have a lot more options. They have Jeff Jackson, Josh Stein. I think even who was it? Was it Chaz Beasley's from the Charlotte area and ran for lieutenant governor? Their congressional bench is thin in that state. But
Rachel Hunt is someone to keep an eye on in the future. She's the daughter of Jim Hunt, who is a very famous and very popular, I think undeservedly so, Democratic governor, reshaped the state. She's someone to keep an eye on. They have candidates. They elected a lot of them in 2018 they can go to. I think someone in the chat mentioned, I believe it was DJ BJ2 agreed about McCready doing worse in the East in exchange for the Charlotte suburbs. Oh, here I'm going to mention this. I'm going to show this on the screen because I have to explain why this is a bad idea. He mentioned Janet Cowell. Advice to Democrats: do not run Janet Cowell. Basically, she was the treasurer of North Carolina, and she was so bad at her job, she angered the unions. She was so bad at her job, they wanted her to resign. She joined multiple corporate boards after she said she would not run for another term. She was accused of giving the pension funds, putting what they were investing into her friends, giving those contracts to her friends. Ultimately, she was so bad of a job as a treasurer that the unions endorsed a Republican to handle their pension funds. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know if I can find another state where if the unions were like, no, we're going to go with a Republican over this. I mean, that's pretty embarrassing. That's why he won by 5 percentage points in office Republicans hadn't held, I think, in 100 years, because he had the backing of the NC State Employees Association. I don't know if he gets it this time, but bad idea. Don't do that. I heard his name being floated around. Don't. Just your friendly advice from a North Carolina Republican. There is so much awful on her. It's not even funny.
Yeah, I heard about Terry Van Dyne today. I heard someone mention her.
Van Dyne. I haven't heard of her.
Yeah, Van Dyne, the one who ran for the lieutenant governor, and she declined to go into a runoff.
Yeah. And, Linda. Yeah, Linda. Yeah.
Which race are we on again? The ninth? Are we on the 9th again from that comment, or what race are we on? I'm sorry, I got lost.
I think we were talking about potential Senate replacements for Richard Burr. We kind of spiraled into that category.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Cool. I mean, we're completely gone on topic.
Yeah. But I mean, what's going to be interesting in North Carolina is to see how the state row level offices do. We have 10. We have the Council of State. It's a split executive, which is very rare for the South and the United States in general. It actually has legitimate powers that are separate from the governor, and the governor has to get their approval. He has to convene with them and get approval on some stuff. A lot of it is like land purchases, stuff nobody really cares about. But they do have some legitimate powers, right? And right now, Republicans have a majority for the first time in 100 years. Right now, the only candidates I would say that are safe in the general, out of the 6 of them, would be Steve Troxler, Agriculture Commissioner. And then there's 3 Democrats who are probably safe, which would probably be Elaine Marshall. And then not Janet Cowell, the Beth Wood, the auditor, because the Republican running against her is literally a criminal.
You never know these days with with the way people don't split. I mean, you never know.
Yeah. So that's going to be a big thing to look at for the future of these districts, because they're going to be redrawn again in 2022. And if there's any indication, they'll probably redrawn again at some point in the middle of the decade, and then again in the late part of the decade. Sorry, I didn't want to spend all that time in North Carolina, but it just kind of spiraled into.
Yeah. I mean, we did talk about Florida earlier, didn't we? With Florida 26.
Florida, South Carolina. Georgia's going to be interesting as well. A couple of races.
Yeah, no, I was going to bring up Georgia.
I'll pull up Georgia on the screen here.
Yeah,
Georgia's a dummy
I had a tweet about the Georgia race. I said how did the Democrats it's become a dumpster fire, in my opinion, despite a not necessarily terrible roster of candidates, but none of them have gotten really enough funding, and then, I mean, for me, a lot of people have complained about, why are the Democrats throwing money at the Kentucky Senate race when Mitch McConnell is probably going to win? For me, I hate Mitch McConnell, I want him. I think he's worse than Trump is. I want him out, so I can't really begrudge that. But I understand where they're coming from, because Georgia, and this also the same line of thinking that I just said for Kentucky goes to South Carolina in the Senate race too. Although Jamie Harrison's a better candidate than Amy McGrath in that race, in my opinion. But regardless, those races seem to have been taking a lot of money away from Georgia, which, honestly, there's a legitimate argument that Georgia is actually a little bit better than North Carolina is trend-wise. I could see Georgia becoming more friendly to Democrats on the presidential level than North Carolina is, which has really leaned towards the Republicans on a presidential level, but Democrats do better there. And Eric, me and you were talking a few weeks ago that, the Democrats were in power there for a long time. And, it's not like in other states, like Florida, and then in Georgia, where it's been a long, long time since Democrats have been in power. North Carolina was recently it has a Democratic governor, so whatever. I'm going off topic here, but it's just been, I think, all the money it's just been a problem. And, but the Republican candidates aren't perfect either. So, I'm talking about the runoff mostly. I mean, I don't know which one you're going to focus on. You're focusing on both? On both, or the special one with Kelly Loeffler? You're focusing on both, or what?
I think we're going to talk about the House races first, but the Senate is a very similar conversation. I know Kraz is the expert on Georgia. He wrote that amazing article a couple months ago about the trends in Georgia, how they're not looking good for the Republican Party. I'm going to zoom in right here onto the Atlanta area, just kind of give an idea of the districts that are in that area.
Well, I mean,
because I feel that I just feel that this area, there was, I think, in that same article, or perhaps it probably the same article that talked about how it'll be really, really hard for the Republicans to try to match that. So I think that could just become the area that level. That was what the article was referring to, right? Because I think I've read it, but it could have been another one.
Well, it's at all levels.
Yeah. All levels.
Oh, really? Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, this map is really a dummy mander. This kind of shows you how confident Georgia Republicans were to start the decade. Is they have a seat. They drew part of DeKalb County into the 6th district for no reason at all. No reason at all. They drew it in there. And that's what cost them the race, is because they won the Cobb portion. They won the Fulton portion. They lost the DeKalb portion because DeKalb is an extremely blue county. But they drew the wide areas of DeKalb in and were like, we can counter their votes. No, you can't at this point. The 11th just goes into Atlanta. Why? The 7th district is like, literally, I've drawn maps in my own spare time that you can draw. I mean, it's really easy to pack into the Atlanta area, to pack Democrats and then to just crack the mountains into the Republican areas. But they didn't do it, and they're actually paying the price because Lucy McBath in the 6th district is one of the competitive races. And then Rob Woodall is not running for re-election in the 7th, which is most of Gwinnett, which is exponentially moving towards the Democratic Party. I was astounded to see how fast it was moving. This is a county that gave George Bush 66% of the vote in 2004, and Clinton won it by, I believe, 10 points. That's really fast, and it's only getting bluer. It's at all levels. The county legislature in Gwinnett is blue now. It voted blue for, I think, pretty much all of the state legislative candidates voted blue in the 7th district. That's the reason why it was so close, is that Rob Woodall only beat the Democratic candidate by, I think, a few hundred votes. So Georgia's one they got to pay attention to this time. The 9th district is open because Doug Collins is running for Senate, but that's not going to be competitive. I found it interesting. They split up Athens, Georgia, but they didn't split up Atlanta as well. I don't know why. This map just leaves a lot more questions to be things to wonder about, because it gives you an idea of how confident Republicans were to start in the decade. They assumed they were going to have power in Georgia for a long time, and it may be about up.
Well, I mean, there was really no reason not to.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's interesting to me because whether or not the trends are being determined by more diverse people coming in from the film industry as well as moving in from other parts of the country, or it's suburban women who don't care for Trump. Because I talked to one person from Georgia who said, after Trump, these suburban just vote for Republicans again. This could be, and this is also nationwide, could just be a Trump era type of thing. So I'm not really, I guess it just depends on how good you can understand from where the Republicans were, is these suburban districts were pretty solidly in their camp at that point in time. The data might show something different. I'm not as big of a data expert as some of you on here on this state. But it seems as if it's kind of a question mark for Georgia, I guess, as well as nationwide, if these suburban people who are determining, Trump's fate overall are going to go back to the Republican coalition, or they're going to stay in the Democrat coalition.
Well, I would push back on the idea that they're going to jump back right away a little bit. It's worth remembering that Romney only won Georgia by 9 points, which was a healthy margin. But given the growth of Metro Atlanta and how big his margins already were in lots of the rural white areas of the state, that's not a huge margin to start with. The other thing to recognize is that I would push back on this idea that they'll all come back right after Trump. I think when you look at political trends in general, can you point me to an area of the country where, John Kerry or Al Gore did well and Obama tanked and Obama did terribly, and then they came back to Hillary Clinton, or they're going to come back to Joe Biden? I don't think an area like that exists at all. Actually, in fact, the areas where Obama tanked versus Kerry and Gore are exactly the same areas that where Hillary tanked, and where Biden's going to have an uphill climb to regain. And so I would push back on the whole it's just a temporary switch, because I think that also views, Trump as the disease itself, not disease, but you know what I mean, the cause of everything, as opposed to his selection as the nominee and his popularity within the party being an effect of lower level gradual changes that have been going on for years. So yeah, that's just my 2 cents on the whole suburban shift thing.
And for me, Gwinnett County is actually a majority minority county now. The majority of its inhabitants it's not majority black, but a lot of them are black, Hispanic, Asian. Is actually a lot of Asian residents in Gwinnett County.
Language access recently.
What was that?
They were sued recently by the DOJ over language access as far as ballots, because they weren't printing out bilingual ballot and election materials.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Which that's not surprising if you look at the area, because Atlanta is one of the most diverse metropolitan areas in the country, like Houston, like New York, Chicago, Los Angeles. Very similar in that it's trending that way. It's 55% of the population of Georgia, and every single county that's growing in population in that area pretty much is trending towards the Democratic Party. If you look at it that way, that's really bad news for Republicans, because there's not a whole lot of hope. The places they're gaining are in the South, and that's mainly because the Democratic voters are dying in that area. They're gaining in the North, but really they can't gain any more white voters in the mountains. There's not really much more they can gain in the South. Is they basically have to hope the voters come back. because otherwise they don't really have much to go off of. I mean, when you're losing areas like northern Fulton County, this is an area, keep in mind, 10 years ago, this part of Fulton County was so conservative, they wanted to secede from the South. They wanted to secede from Atlanta so they could govern their own county. And now a lot of that area is voting for Democrats. You're losing places like that. That's not a good sign. And they have a lot of room to fall in that area. That's kind of why I take a look at Georgia and look at North Carolina and say, I know we've talked about this, Sammy, is that just North Carolina just looks better long term because there's areas Republicans are measurably gaining in that are growing in population. And those just simply do not exist to nearly the same degree in Georgia. Georgia is dominated by Atlanta. The past of Georgia is Atlanta. The present of Georgia is Atlanta. And the future of Georgia is going to be Atlanta. If you don't do well in Atlanta, you better hope you run 90% of the vote up in the rest of the counties because it's a problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, we'll see because some of these districts are going to vote more Democratic than they did last time. We'll see if the 7th is going to be close. I know the 6th is also going to be close. The 11th will be interesting to look at, not because it's going to be competitive, but to see how it shifts. Just because it has that weird spoke of Fulton County into it. But that's kind of Georgia. I know we kind of went over some of the stuff in Florida, but there's actually other competitive races in Florida. Like I believe Spano's district is supposed to be competitive to some degree. What's her name? I don't want to take the night away from her. Donna Shalala. She can be competitive. Her district could be to a degree competitive. So I'm going to pull up a map of Florida and we can kind of go over anything there that would be of relevance. Because that's actually an interesting state as well. If Trump is having problems with elderly voters, which it seems he is, that's not a great thing for Republicans to be dealing with because that's a lot of the population of Florida.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the poll numbers are crazy. What I've seen.
Yeah, I wouldn't, but don't put too much stock in Florida polls. They can be anything really above 2 points is 2.9 points is probably unlikely for a state like Florida. It's so split that it's gonna be really close unless Trump is completely just like, drowning by November. I doubt to see Florida decided by any more than 2 points. Genya, what do you think?
I think it depends on where in Florida you're talking about. But one of the things that is going to be something that Trump's going to have to overcome is the impact of COVID-19 because there are so many seniors here.
Yep. Yep, definitely. Yeah, I could see it hurting, but keep going.
And there's also one of the things that people also don't appreciate about Florida is Florida in a lot of parts of the state is majority minority, and COVID-19 has been targeting mostly people of color. So you're going to have a lot of those people happen to be seniors. So Trump's going to have a bit of explaining to do with those specific demographics. And I think Biden's doing just fine as far as Black voters go, but he really does need to get in gear as far as Hispanic voters because right now they're undecided and there are a hell of a lot of them in Florida.
Yeah. And that's one sign I take a lot of credit, probably undeservedly, for saying that Rick Scott was going to be competitive for the Senate in Florida in 2018. And one of the moments that I saw that I was like, this could actually flip is when Rick Scott decided to run ads for the World Cup and Bill Nelson did not. I think Democrats have a lack of understanding to some degree about I think they assume that South Florida has a lot of Latinos and Latinos tend to vote Democratic. So we don't need to put any effort in there because the Latinos are all going to vote Democratic. These people have never been to Hialeah. They've never been to South Miami, to any of these areas because it's not the same as California. It's not the same as New Mexico or Arizona.
But I do think though that Biden probably is doing, I guess his standing right now is a little bit better with Hispanic voters in Florida because they're less receptive to the immigration attacks that Trump that the Democrats used to attack Trump with. While actually I think in states like Arizona And then even Nevada and Colorado, there will be people who are more affected by Obama's, status as people like to call him the what's the word again? The deporter in chief. So I think he might have more of in Florida, I think that there's a chance that he is a little bit better, not great right now, but a little bit better than some of those areas, because of the fact that the attacks against Trump on immigration don't play as well there as they do in other states.
Well, one thing I'll say about Florida, and kind of in regards to South Florida, is I think resource allocation is going to be a big deal in Florida. There's a lot of talk about, has Trump improved with Hispanics? Is he the same? Is the dynamics we saw in 2018 due to changing Cuban and Hispanic turnout, or is it because of real conversion? And I think that's going to be really important because, I can picture a universe where, the Trump campaign buys into this idea that they've improved Hispanics and they spend a lot of money to turn out, Cuban voters and other Hispanic voters in South Florida. And, it doesn't pay dividends because they kind of, drank the Kool-Aid that, they've made these big improvements, when I'm kind of, I'm more skeptical on whether or not they actually have. I do think there are a couple areas that'll be interesting if you scroll up to North Florida. I think the area around like Florida 4 is going to be a really interesting area. It's got a lot of wealthy, very conservative suburbs around Jacksonville. And I think that's the kind of area that, a lot of cities in Florida have less of those kinds of areas, but I think Jacksonville has them to a larger degree. And I think that's a place where, it's been ruby red for so long that a drop in Trump's margin there won't make the map look any different. It's not going to flip blue. It's not going to maybe even be a different shade of red, but it could cost him a large number of votes.
Yes. It's important to note that Rick Scott did lose Jacksonville in 2018. I was in a group chat with several other conservatives, and we were looking at this election. I had heard from the beginning that Rick Scott was going to be doing well. So when I saw that he lost Jacksonville, I was like, oh, that's not good at all. But he still won. Yeah. It's because it's a consolidated city county. So there are other cities inside the county, but the county and the city are consolidated. Duval and Jacksonville are the same thing. But it's an interesting area because it's had a conservative black mayor before. It currently has a Republican mayor, but before him was a black conservative Democrat mayor. That was actually a primary challenge in the 5th district between the current incumbent and then the former mayor of Jacksonville, if I remember that right. But Florida is going to be fascinating because it's an interesting. I mean, there's so many different coalitions you have to work with. You got the Volusia County, the white voters that have shifted from Obama to Trump. You've got the South Florida Hispanics that have shifted from Republicans to Democrats, but still vote for them down ballot. You've got the minority areas in the Leon County, Tallahassee, areas around Pinellas, Hillsborough, and in South Florida. So it's a really interesting state where there's a lot of coalitions you have to deal with.
Florida, it's really all about the margins. Scott did lose Duval County, which helped him win both of his governor races for 2010 and 2014. But he only lost Duval County by a small amount. Actually, Gillum did much better there, and I think obviously that has to do with the fact that Gillum was, an African-American candidate. Nelson wasn't. So I think that has to do with it, that and then Scott's history of doing well in Duval County. But, I think that I definitely am, for me, I'm enthusiastic about Duval. I'm seeing Democrats gain in voter registration there by a big amount. I'm seeing, 2019 was kind of a disaster for them because they didn't have a candidate for mayor. And so all their other races that they hoped were going to flip kind of collapsed. But I'm enthusiastic about Duval County. But it's really, the whole senior thing is definitely going to be a big issue to watch because I think I was talking about this today that Biden, he's the oldest candidate we've had for a while. And he has this kind of, but he's all, some people are like, don't think he's lost his luster. I don't personally think he has that kind of sentimental kind of like grandfather kind of like charm to him that somebody like Hillary Clinton, and this isn't a criticism, it's just Hillary Clinton's appeal is not that. But I think that will help Biden in Florida. And then also the COVID-19, you know, and also the unemployment system too. DeSantis really screwed up today if you follow the news on that today. And DeSantis and Trump, you know, have been working pretty closely together in their efforts, in their political careers in Florida. So the unemployment system will be a big factor too, because people will be angry about how the economy is there. So we'll see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely going to be a state to look at. And I don't know if you want to go over the only other state in the South with a competitive race is Texas, if I recall right. Aside from Oklahoma, if you want to consider Oklahoma Southern, I don't consider it Southern. Oklahoma is a whole other can of worms because the stuff with the tribal, I believe it's called McGinty or McGurty, which could potentially return most of eastern Oklahoma to a Native American reservation for the Choctaw, which would be that'd be interesting. That would result in some congressional changes for sure. But Texas has a ton of stuff, but I don't feel necessarily qualified to go over the in-depth of Texas, other than what I've heard is I don't think Republicans are going to gain back any of the seats they lost last time. And Democrats have a chance to gain a couple that they just barely missed out on last time. So, for example, the seat, I know Drew goes after this guy all the time on Twitter. Chip Roy. He basically votes like he's a Freedom Caucus member in a seat that is not that. But there's some others along that line. You know, the 23rd district, Will Hurd is retiring, and so it's probably going to go to Gina Ortiz Jones, who's a Democrat, barely lost last time. I don't know if anyone else has any other thoughts on Texas, but I figured I should mention it because it is a very big state.
Well, given Garcia's given Garcia's win, we talked about earlier, I actually would not underestimate Republicans candidate in Texas 7. Texas 7 in many ways bears a lot of similarities to California 25. It's wealthy, it's suburban, although California 25 is one over a little more exurban, less dense, but it's wealthy, suburban, diverse. It does have a solid Republican voter base I forget what the area is called. I think it's Bel Air, around South Houston. And then the rest of the district is more mixed. So I wouldn't write them off there. But otherwise, I don't think they're going to be gaining back the rest of, or the other seats they lost. I do think Roy's probably safe. I think Roy probably is voting like that because he assumes he's going to get drawn into a safe district come 2022, and he's probably not wrong. So, yeah.
I was wanting to ask Genya if, because it's her district, just if you don't mind going just a little bit back to Florida, about Ross Spano. I don't know and if you think the Democrats have a credible chance of flipping that seat, and I guess what are your thoughts on that?
If it happens, it will be a very tight race. I'm not expecting that. I mean, I have to be careful about what I say because I don't want to be perceived as unduly influencing this particular race. But one of the things that I have noticed is Polk County and that part of District 15, there are far more people who are registered as nonpartisan or Democrat, and they're rapidly replacing some of the folks who would have ordinarily been registered as GOP. So the group to pay attention to in this specific race are, do the nonpartisan people show up to vote in the August primary, and what are their numbers? And then I think the Democrats, if they've really got a shot, I think they can develop a better game plan for, say, November. I mean, Ross Spano certainly got it's not exactly a secret.
Yeah, Florida's kind of notorious because the new map it has a lot of seats that on paper should be competitive, but the candidates that reside in the seats are strong enough where that lean kind of doesn't matter as much. I mean, like Brian Nast, he's pretty safe at his seat, even though on paper it should be fairly competitive. Don't know if Ross Spano falls into that category, but it's definitely one of those closer
I don't think so.
PVIs than you'd expect.
And for the areas of the parts of the district that are in Hillsborough and Lake, do you know if those lean Democratic or GOP, or do those have large amounts of NPAs as well?
Lake leans GOP. There's some parts of Hillsborough that actually have a working faction of the Green Party. I'm not kidding. There's this weird little pocket of Hillsborough right around Plant City where there are some surprisingly liberal people, considering that this is it's a mostly rural area.
Mm-hmm.
So there, like I said, there are some pockets of deep blue into the green, but then they're surrounded by pale pink to medium red. So
I
it
wouldn't
just
have thought
depends.
Florida had a Green Party.
Yes, there's actually a Green Party candidate in Hillsborough County who has made it onto the municipal ballot. I'm not joking.
Wow. Yeah, you don't usually see the Green Party. I mean, when they show up, it's usually, in San Francisco. Kraz would know all about San Francisco with the Green Party showing up, but you don't usually see them in Florida, of all places.
Believe it or not, there are parts of Hillsborough County that are very, very liberal. It's interesting to watch.
Yeah. I know North Carolina, the Green Party is now on the ballot, and that was mostly because Republicans changed the law to make it easier for the Green Party to get on the ballot. Because for years we've been paranoid about libertarians taking our votes. So we want Green Party to take some of the Democratic votes, I guess, in Watauga or Chapel Hill or something. But yeah, you wouldn't think in Hillsborough. You'd think like that would be something in Gainesville, college area.
Orlando's very liberal.
Yeah.
So Hillsborough is becoming. It used to be straight red. It's a straight red city. It's not anymore. It's gradually. It's kind of the colors are dissolving a bit into each other. And Ybor City is definitely becoming more blue than red.
I see Hillsborough is starting to become close to a think that the GOP is going to have a more difficult time there. Nikki Fried won the county by about 56,000 votes in 2018, which is huge. Gillum and Nelson did close to getting that much. I mean, they won by 40-something thousand votes, but 56,000 votes, that's a big amount. And if Biden gets that margin out of Hillsborough, that would put him in pretty good shape, actually. I mean, everywhere matters. Florida is a big mess of a state, but Hillsborough, if it comes through for Biden in that way, that would be good for him.
Mm-hmm. I mean, if it's liberal enough to have a Green Party, you never know. So
they are actually a recognized political party.
Yeah.
I mean, hey,
Jill Stein's gonna flip it.
Yeah, Jill. Oh boy. She's interesting. Have you heard some of her alternative rock albums? I'm not joking. She did that. They're not good. They're not good at all. It's like an environmentalist hippie alt rock band.
Mm-hmm. But to circle back to Texas a little bit, actually, which we were, if we can.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think one thing I'm interested to hear people's opinions on is Texas 24, which I think is an interesting district. It was about Trump +3, I think, and then it went to Beto +3 or +4 during the Senate race. And so shifted significantly. It's heavily suburban.
Oh, that's Merchant's seat, right?
Yeah. And he was a very generic Bush Republican, but now he's retired. It's an open seat. The Republican nominee is going to be someone named Beth Van Dyne. She's
the mayor of,
she's the mayor of Irving,
Fort Worth, right?
Irving, Texas, I think. Yeah. It's a little unclear to me whether she lives in the district or not. The other problem is that she became best known for some comments that some found to be Islamophobic. I think she has something offensive about mosques. So she seems like an okay candidate, but nothing special. I'm interested to hear people's thoughts on it.
Yeah, I hadn't heard about the Muslim. I had heard I heard mayor of Irving, Texas. So I was like, she must be a good candidate. But no, I hadn't heard that stuff may have flown in 2014, but that's not going to really fly in 2020 Texas. Yeah, That's not a great thing to be doing.
Is this Houston suburbs or Dallas or Austin or which ones?
Dallas. So it's northwestern Dallas County and northeastern Tarrant County.
Yeah, I believe Irving is where Jerryland is, right? That's where the Cowboy Stadium is.
Yes.
Yeah.
I thought it was Arlington, or maybe.
Which one is it? Look up.
I've never been to Texas.
Oh yeah, it's in Arlington. Yeah, but same metropolitan area. Irving is
Not too far from Garland.
Oh, that's what it was. Irving had the old Cowboy Stadium before they built the new one in Arlington. So this is like, you think, blood red Dallas. That's kind of what you think of, that sort of area. But the shifts in Dallas have been incredible. I know from what I had been told from people who were, in the know, that early in the race, Greg Abbott was polling very well in Dallas. He was, close to tied, if not winning. And he ended up losing it by a very large margin. It's to the point where I don't think there's going to be very many Republican precincts left in the county at all, aside from the couple of Christian cities in the center, which is where Baylor. I believe Baylor. If it's not Baylor, it's
SMU.
Southern Methodist. Yeah, SMU.
Yeah.
That's what he calls them, the Christian areas. Those would be the only red areas left in that entire county. It's quickly becoming just a ghost town for Republicans.
Well, yeah, and speaking to that, I think that's also another good point about why to maybe be a little bit skeptical of polls that show, X candidate or X party doing really well in an area they shouldn't, right? I'm sure, Republicans believed that Abbott was going to do well in Dallas. So, well, it makes sense. He's popular. He's moderate. He's done this outreach. And then when you get down the stretch and it's just, the partisanship kicks in and all those people that were telling you they were going to vote for him aren't so sure about voting for him anymore. And I think that's something to keep in mind, too, when we look at polls, the polls say Biden does really well with old voters. Does that hold down the stretch after 6 months? I don't know. Polls say that Trump's improved with Hispanics. Does that hold down the stretch? I don't know. So, I think that's just another lesson to, be careful of subsamples.
Yeah, if you look at the maps that the Biden campaign put out of the states they think are competitive, New Mexico is not on that list. The Trump campaign manager has this bizarre obsession with New Mexico. I don't know why.
It isn't.
It's weird.
He's kind of convinced that Trump is going to win New Mexico, and no, he's not. And the Biden campaign. Yeah, I posted a joke map in a group chat where it has a blue Texas and blue Arizona, but Trump wins because he wins New Mexico.
Well, look,
I have to campaign in Albuquerque.
I'm not going to write anything off after 2016. I don't want to write any possibilities off.
Yeah.
No.
You got to be careful. But, I think part of it, I think it serves two purposes, this weird obsession with New Mexico. To be perfectly honest, the first is that it's an attempt to signal to moderates that, if you vote for, Donald Trump, you're not voting for a campaign of white people that win in white states. You're voting for a racially diverse coalition that wins in, right? So that's part of it. The other thing, too, is that I think they won in 2016 because they put effort into states that everyone was like, you're never going to win them. And then they flipped them. And so I think they think that they have this magic wand where they can just decide they're going to put effort in New Mexico and the
Maine is blue.
Well, I would take issue with that a little bit because, it was clear that Trump had appeal with the blue collar voter. In a state like Pennsylvania, Republicans have been trying to win Pennsylvania for years and years and years. And it was probably going to be a target no matter who the nominee was going to be in 2016. Yeah. But I do think that, 2016, obviously, they pulled a rabbit out of their hat and, they're wanting to try to do the same thing. But I think it also could just be kind of a red herring for the Democrats, make them spend money in this place. We'll focus more on Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. Somebody said that Karl Rove did something similar with the Kerry campaign with Hawaii. He would say stupid stuff like, these internal polls for Bush in Hawaii are way up. And, he would throw them off the scent. So I think that's a part of what the whole New Mexico thing is. And I've even heard buzz about Oregon and even New Jersey from some people. So
Yeah.
I think it's kind of just stretching their muscles, showing off their guns, but also, trying to make Democrats, go after red herrings.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I mean, you never know. I mean, maybe saying after 2020, Biden should have campaigned in Albuquerque. You never know.
Yep. That's the Monday morning quarterbacking of the day. Everybody's going to be like, if he just went to New Mexico, he never went to New Mexico. Like Hillary never went to Wisconsin.
Yeah. So I think with that, we've gone over all the southern states. We've gone over, Georgia, Texas, North Carolina. I think it's kind of a good note to go off of. So, thanks to everyone for tuning in. Sorry for the technical difficulties at the start. It seemed like it was something with Wi-Fi or microphone issues. So who knows? But yeah, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week, 6 o'clock.
Yep.
So, yep.